What's up, guys? Sam Productions here, back with another video. Today, we are going to be doing a UFC pay-per-view tier list. Pretty much rating the past few pay-per-views all the way from the start of last year, which starts with UFC 283. So yeah, let's get started with UFC 283. This was two title fights. I want to put it in B. It was Glover Teixeira versus Jamal Hill, Davidson Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno. These were some decent fights. They were mostly domination, though. Honestly, I would say both fights. But the main card was decent, so overall, I'd have to give like a B tier. Next up, we have UFC 284. This is also going to go in B tier. Main event was pretty good. Main card was decent. Again, nothing too bad, but at the same time, nothing special. Then I have UFC 285, which is John Jones versus Cyril Gahn, and this honestly feels like an S tier. Card was honestly really good. With John Jones come back and win the title, it's also going to get some more points because he's the GOAT. He comes back after, a really long hiatus and beats Cyril Gahn that easily. That was pretty cool to see. And we also saw an upset with Alexa Grasso beating Valentina Shevchenko, which was, I think, an upset based on, if I remember correctly, the odds for the fight. So yeah, pretty eventful card, and I honestly thought it was really good. Now I have UFC 286. It's gonna go in A tier. It's better than UFC 283 and 84. The main event was pretty good. The co-main event was also pretty good. Main event was, the main card was okay, I would say. Nothing too special, but at the same time, wasn't anything bad. So overall, I'm gonna have to give it an A tier. Now we have UFC 287, which is Pereira versus Adesanya, and this is also gonna get an A tier. I thought the main card was really good. I thought the main event was really eventful and fun. Co-main event was decent. Overall, honestly, I thought this was an A tier card. Again, not as good as UFC 285, but still a really good card. Again, it was just overall just a solid card. Again, no complaints, honestly, for me. Again, this was a while ago, so I might not remember everything that correctly, but all I remember is that the fights were pretty good, and that ending of that main event was actually really good as well. So overall, I'm gonna have to put it in A tier. Now we have UFC 288, and I want to put this in like year C. I'm probably gonna put it in B. Nothing too crazy. You had Bilal Muhammad beating Gilbert Burns in the co-main. If I remember correctly, Gilbert Burns dislocated his shoulder. And then the main event, Aljamain Sterling versus Henry Cejudo. It was decent. Nothing too crazy. This is going B. Main card was okay, I guess. Again, nothing too special. It's some kind of bad fights, honestly, on the main card. But overall, it's B tier. Again, nothing horrible. Now we have UFC 289, and this is genuinely like one of the worst cards I've ever seen in my entire life. It's $70. Let me just go over the main card. For the opening fight of the main card, you had Marc-Andre Barrigal versus Eric Anders. Then you had Dan Ige versus Nate Landwehr. No disrespect to Dan Ige, but that's not a main card fight. You had Mike Malott versus Adam Fugit. Then you had Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush. Again, that's a great fight. But then you had Amanda Nunes versus Irene Aldana. That's a horrible card. Genuinely such a bad card, and I did not have much enjoyment watching it at the time. Looking back at it now, it was literally so bad. The best fight in the card was obviously Oliveira versus Dariush. That's literally what you're paying $70 for. And then the main event, again, Nunes is the GOAT, no disrespect to her, but she's so dominant that she makes fights boring like that. She retired, so in my opinion, that was a win for me because then we can maybe see some more competitive champions coming in, or even just more competitive fights. But again, no disrespect to Amanda Nunes, but this fight card was horrible. Like I think it was their first time returning to Vancouver in forever too, and they gave him such a bad card. Like I understand you got to put Canadian fighters on the card. I can do better than this. Like this was absolutely horrible. So yeah, again, no disrespect to anyone on the card, but honestly, I would say 3 of these 5 fights should not have been on the main card for honestly any card. Now we have UFC 290, and I'm not even joking. This is gonna go in S tier. This was such a fun. I don't know why it was just so fun to watch. For let's say the first fight in the main card, you had Val Woodburn versus Bo Nickel. I honestly thought that Val Woodburn was kind of hurting Bo Nickel. That was a fun fight to get the card rolling. Then you had Dan Hooker somehow beating Jalen Turner in an upset, if I remember correctly. Like that was an upset. That was fun to watch. Then you had Dricus du Plessis and another upset beating Robert Whitaker, and then I did a whole exchange between him and Adesanya. Then you had Brandon Moreno and Alexander Pantoja kind of go at it a little bit, and Pantoja won by decision. Then you had Alexander Volkanovski beating Yair Rodriguez with TKO. Overall, it was just such a fun fight card to watch, and it was just so much fun. Genuinely, just so much fun just to watch. And even look back at it, that was such a fun just fight card to even just to be happening at the time. In the middle of summer, right after whatever 4th of July. Overall, just such a good fight card, so it's gotta go in S tier. Then you had UFC 291, and this is generally gonna go in S tier. You had the rematch of one of the better fights, probably of the in UFC history, and this fight was also awesome. It was just kind of cut short by Justin Gaethje, just pretty much roundhouse kicking Dustin Poirier. Maybe not roundhouse kicking, you know what I mean? Like drop Dustin Poirier. Then you had a light heavyweight contender fight. I'm pretty sure, maybe not contender fight, but Pereira moving up to light heavyweight and fighting Jan Blachowicz, which was a great fight. They had Derek Lewis hitting a flying knee on Marcos Rogia de Lima, which is honestly so crazy. Then you saw a submission in the final 6 seconds of the Tony Ferguson fight, which is also fun. Then you saw Kevin Holland beat Michael Chiesa. I might be pronouncing it wrong. But it's just a fun fight card. Again, it's honestly the exact same as UFC 290. A fun fight card, but also the fights were honestly pretty good. So I got to give that an S tier. I have UFC 292, and honestly, this is teetering between A and B. I'm gonna lean towards A though because there were some good fights on this card, but honestly, some of the fights were just kind of annoying. Honestly, you had Aljamain and Sterling losing to Sean O'Malley. You had Jang Lee dominating Amanda Lemos. You had even Sean O'Gary dominating Neil Magny. It was just kind of like a weird fight card. It didn't necessarily like make me upset because I wanted Sean O'Malley to win, but I didn't want even Gary to win. I didn't really want Zhang Weili. I wanted her to win, I guess, but I didn't really want her to win in that fashion. And then you had Marlon Vera on the main card, which is good, but you also had Damone Blackshear versus Mario Batista, which was I think he had to step in for that fight if I remember correctly. That's probably why it was on the main card still. I might be just remembering wrong, but it was still a decent fight card. It still gets an A just because that fight was so hyped up between Sterling and O'Malley, and it definitely delivered. So I got to go with an A tier. But at the same time, that main card wasn't that great. If the main card was truly amazing, I would probably gotten an S tier. But overall, I would just have to put in an A tier. Now we have UFC 293, and honestly, this is gonna get probably a. It's either A or B. I'm gonna go B though, just because the main card really wasn't that good. Like, the main event was Tai Tuivasa versus Alexander Volkov, and Tai Tuivasa stinks. Then you had Manel Kape versus Felipe dos Santos, Justin Tafa versus Austin Lane. Justin Tafa should never be in a main event of any pay-per-view fight card. Then you had Tyson Pedro versus Anton College. Come on. Again, I understand it's in Sydney, Australia, but come on, that's horrible. It was fun to see Sean Strickland win. It was fun to see Izzy honestly kind of lose and maybe like see a new champion, honestly. We had Pereira, but then Izzy gained it back, and then it was like, okay, Pereira moved to light heavyweight. It was fun to see that, but overall, this fight card was okay. Again, the main event really just entirely carried that entire, honestly, main card because that fight, Sean Strickland didn't win, and Adesanya won. Like, I genuinely think this fight card would have been forgotten. So, overall, I would have to go and B. Now I have UFC 294, and for what it's worth, I don't know why there's two on this tier list. For what it's worth, this goes in A tier because it was a fun fight card. But it kind of sucks because these matches were supposed to be so much better. Like Islam versus Charles would have been much more fun to watch than Islam versus Volkanovski, where Volkanovski pretty much like lost so quickly that it was honestly kind of upsetting. He had Hamza versus Usman, or Usman, honestly, that shouldn't have tied. There's no reason why Hamza should have won that fight. I'm starting to think Hamza a little bit overrated after that fight. But either way, it should have been Costa. I wish Costa. And then the other main card was just it's whatever, you know what I mean? It's okay. But the main two fights I just wish were better. Just if the guys originally who were supposed to fight, didn't have to, drop out, this card would have probably been an S. But since they dropped out, it's gonna have to go in A. For what it's worth, they did their best to kind of repair the fight card, and it was pretty fun to watch. But overall, I think it started at like 1 p.m. too on a Saturday, which was kind of weird too, especially because all the football going on. I guess because it's in Abu Dhabi, but either way, overall, it gets an A. It's better than these cards down here. But again, it could have been an S tier if all those original guys like Costa and Oliveira didn't, drop out. I have UFC 295, and this is genuinely one of the best fight cards of the year. It probably is the best. All 5 fights in the main card ended in TKO. It's just amazing. And all the fights were good fights too. They weren't bad at all. They were like genuinely good. And it's just such a good card. Honestly, so fun to watch. It was the second last one of the year, and honestly, they showed out a ton. So that's genuinely like again one of the best fight cards I've ever watched. It's by far the best one this year. Probably the best one, maybe the best one out of this list. I don't know, but at least for 2023, by far the best. So yeah, that's an easy S tier for UFC 295. I have UFC 296, and this is gonna be the first C tier. The like narratives or whatever, like the events leading up to this fight. This was I thought this was gonna be the best fight card of the year. Josh Emmett versus Bryce Mitchell. That was an insane fight. You're going into this fight card. You see Josh Allen versus Bryce Mitchell. You know the way it ended. You're like, oh my god, it's gonna be the best fight card of the year. That's what honestly I was thinking. But then you had Tony Ferguson versus Paddy Pimblett. That again, that story leading up to that fight was crazy. You had David Goggins training Tony Ferguson. People were literally betting on Tony Ferguson because people thought, he's gonna, somehow do better with Goggins in the corner, which did not happen. He got destroyed by Paddy Pimblett. And then you had Shavkat Rakhmonov beating up Stephen Thompson. I think pretty much everyone saw that coming. Then you saw Alexandre Pantoja beat Bren Royval pretty easily. Then you saw Leon Edwards beat Colby Covington pretty easily. Again, the storylines leading up to the card, amazing. Like those are some of the best storylines ever. But how the fight card actually delivered, it was a C. Genuinely, like I was really disappointed by this fight card, especially by the main event because I really thought it was going to be such a crazy fight. I thought both sides it was going to be like a not necessarily like a brawl, but I genuinely thought it was going to be like that, and it just ended up being a boring fight. So again, storylines A plus or S tier, honestly. Actual fight and how they delivered, C tier. Now we have UFC 297. It's gonna go in B tier. Nothing too special. Like it was okay. Honestly, I'm gonna bump it down to C. When I watched it, I didn't think it was that good. It was like kind of fun, but at the same time, the fight card was kind of weak. You had Neil Magny versus Mike Malott, Chris Curtis versus Mark Andre Barrial, Arnold Allen versus Movsar Evloev. The main fight was pretty good, but I felt like the wrong person won the fight. And then the women's fight was just complete domination. So overall, it's gonna get a C. Again, really like kind of like the ruling, honestly, on that last fight kind of probably ruined the card for some people. I still thought it was okay, but honestly, this stretch of two fight cards, honestly, Edwards, Covington, Strickland, Duplessis were honestly pretty bad. I have UFC 298, and honestly, this is gonna go in A tier. Good fights, but I'm so mad, so mad about some of the rulings. First of all, Geoff Neal won the fight against Ian Gary. Ian Gary did not win 30 to 27. That's absolutely false. I guarantee you those refs rigged it. Then you had Merab Dvalishvili versus Henry Cejudo. That was a good fight. Anthony Hernandez versus Roman Kaipilov, again a good fight. Whitaker versus Costa, good fight. Volkanovski, Topuria, good fight. But I'm so mad about that ruling. I do not like Ian Machado Gary that much. I think he's super conky. I think he's just trying to be like McGregor, and no one can ever be like McGregor. Honestly, the act is getting old now. But for him to win that fight, I would have been mad if it was 29-28. But the fact that he won 30-27, the fact that the judges gave him that is insane. So yeah, fight card, it's gonna get an A. But I feel like honestly, if Jeff Neal would have gotten that decision, it probably would have been an S. Maybe just a little biased for me, but I genuinely think that was just the wrong decision. Now we have UFC 299, and I genuinely think this is like second best fight card of 20 the past whatever what I'm running right now. I'm saying I'm not gonna say past 2 years or since 2023, but it's as good as UFC 295. This fight card was so good. You had Peter Yan versus Song Yadong, great fight. Gilbert Burns versus Jack Della Maddalena, great fight. Kevin Holland versus Michael Page, a little boring but still a good fight. You had Poirier somehow upsetting Saint Denis. Then you had absolute domination in the main card or main event. So again, even some of the fights were just kind of some boring. They were still eventful to watch. They were so fun to watch. You saw Michael Venom Page hitting some crazy moves. You saw Sean O'Malley cement himself as the champion, since a lot of people were saying that he shouldn't have deserved that title shot. He shouldn't have, beat. He's gonna get taught by whatever Marlon Vera. But he won in that fashion, and just the fight card was so good. And as well, we saw Curtis Blades beating Jailton Almeida, and if you saw my video yesterday, you realize how much I hate Jailton Almeida. That was also just amazing. And top to bottom, like the fights were so good. I'm just gonna go off. I'm gonna go talk about the prelims now. You had Robelis Despayne. You had that. That was the crazy dude. He was like 6'7". You had Gamrot. You had Pedro Munoz. Like all those guys were in like the prelims and early prelims. Like that's ridiculous. That's like a crazy, fight card just in the prelims alone. So this fight card is an easy S tier. Now we have UFC 300, and this was the big one. You know what I mean? This was the hyped up as the best, card of not necessarily the UFC career, but they're pretty much acting like this is the best card and will probably be the best card for a while. This is going in S tier. I would say it's about as good as these three right here. These three cards right here are all so good, and I honestly think that they're all just perfect. So for this one, you had the BMF title, and Max Holloway finished, Justin Gaethje with 1 second left. Generally one of the craziest endings in probably fight history. Probably is honestly the crazy ending. Then you had Alex Pereira beating up Jamal Hill, Zhang Weili beating up Yan Joinan. Then you had Charles Oliveira losing to Armin Tuscaran, which honestly I felt like was the wrong decision, but whatever. Then you had Bo Nickel beating Cody Brundage. But let's go to the prelims because these prelims honestly could have been a main card on its own. You had Yuri Prochazka beating Alexander Rakic, Calvin Cater losing to Aljamain Sterling, Holly Holm losing to Kayla Harrison, Sodiq Youssef losing to Diego Lopes. Like these are amazing cards. Like this is ridiculous. Even early prelims, Jalen Turner facing Renato Moicano, Estefan Gerard fighting on the early prelims. Guys, she's sometimes headlining UFC Fight Nights, and she's fighting in the early prelims. Bobby Green facing off against Jim Miller. Davison Figueiredo was the first fight on the card. He was in the early prelims. Like, this was just such an amazing card. Um, Honestly, I think this was probably the best card UFC could have put together. It would have been cool to see, honestly, like 4 title fights. Like maybe instead of, not sure what you mean, maybe instead of the woman title fight, you could have put in maybe O'Malley versus Vera, just delayed it a month or two. Um, Either way, such an amazing fight card, such amazing fights. This is an easy S tier, probably the easiest S tier on this list. Now I have UFC 301, which is probably the worst fall off in UFC history. We genuinely went from the best main events, or best card we've ever seen in a while, to genuinely one of the worst main cards I've ever seen. Let me go over it. First off, main event. Why is Steve Erceg getting a title shot? I'm not sure what me mean, but how did this dude get a title shot against Pantoja? Genuinely, he did good. I'm giving it that. He did good. He's definitely going to be a contender. But what warranted him to get a title shot? Then you have Jose Aldo versus Jonathan Martinez. Why is Jose Aldo co-main a card in 2024? No disrespect to one of the best fighters of all time, but how is he doing it? We had Anthony Smith on the main card. That's just ridiculous. Craig, you had freaking Michael Pereira on the main card. Like, what are we doing here? This is horrible. I understand. They're in Brazil. You gotta have Brazilian fighters. All the talent they have coming from Brazil and just from, mainly South American countries, you think they would be able to put together a better card. But no, this was absolutely horrible. I understand. You're putting together the best fight card that, some of the fights are not going to be that good on the next one. Holy cow. It's generationally bad. It shouldn't even been a pay-per-view. They should have given this one to us for free. But $70 for this? Sure, some of the fights ended in finishes. But like one fight ended in 54 or like 54 seconds. One ended in 2 minutes. One ended in the second round, and then the main event just went to decision, which is no one likes to see a decision for a title fight. So I genuinely think that this was one of the worst. It's right next to as an Aldana, that whatever fight card for one of the worst probably ever, at least in recent history. UFC 250, if you remember that. If you remember how bad that was, then respect to you. But overall, no disrespect to the fighters in the card. It's the fact that honestly, I think they could have booked the whole card better. Maybe honestly distance itself as much as it can from UFC 300. Like maybe make it a month and a half out, or just maybe not even have UFC 301. Put UFC 302. That's gonna happen. Put into UFC 301. Maybe combine the two. You have the lightweight title and you have the flyweight title in one card. And then hey, maybe you can have like a Brazil fight night instead. So again, poorly built together fight card by the UFC. But yeah, that is going to be it for pretty much rating the past few UFC pay-per-views. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and yeah, I'll see you tomorrow for another Hand Productions video.